Hello everyone, welcome to Sleep Space. Tonight we will talk about what if you never wake up from a dream. I'm glad you're here, settling in, letting the world soften around the edges as we ease into a question most people have felt but rarely slow down long enough to explore. We're going to wander into the boundary between imagination and reality, where the edges are thin and the rules are flexible, and where the familiar act of drifting off becomes something far more mysterious. Every night, when consciousness loosens its grip and the waking world fades, something astonishing happens. You begin to create entire universes without even trying. A dream looks like a quick flicker of images, but behind that flicker lies an intelligence capable of designing landscapes, rewriting the laws of physics, and placing you at the center of a story that feels as real as anything you experience while awake. This is the world we're entering tonight. The strange territory where your awareness feels alive, present, and convinced that what's unfolding around you is truly happening. But imagine this. What if one night you slipped into a dream and simply never woke up? Not in a frightening way. Think of it more like entering a self-contained reality, a place with its own timeline, its own logic, its own memories. The idea is surprising, not because it is impossible, but because it hints at something we don't talk about often. Consciousness doesn't follow the same rules we do. It doesn't need permission from the physical world. It builds what it wants, when it wants, and it can insert you into those creations as though they were destinations, not hallucinations. To start understanding this possibility, think about how your mind behaves in the dreams you've had. It sets up a scenario, places you inside of it, and gives you the full feeling of presence. You walk across a bridge that never existed. You speak to people who were never born. You remember events that never happened. You act as if it all makes sense, and in that moment, it truly does. Your dream self is just as convinced of its world as your waking self is of yours. It believes in the continuity of its surroundings. It reacts, feels emotions, forms opinions, makes choices. And when something unexpected happens, like a sudden shift in scenery or a conversation that takes a surreal turn, your dream self adapts instantly, without resistance. It simply accepts the new reality as though it had always been that way. Now imagine that adaptability lasting longer than a few minutes. Imagine a dream world that doesn't dissolve the moment something interrupts your sleep. A dream that keeps expanding instead of fading. A story that continues in ways even you, the dreamer, cannot predict. It's not just an extended fantasy. It's the idea that consciousness could settle into a different environment entirely, one constructed from your mind, but capable of feeling separate from you. And although it may seem strange, this is not far removed from what you experience every single night. Your dreams are not static. They shift depending on what you felt that day, what you fear, what you hope for, the things you avoid, the memories you barely remember having. Most of the time, we treat dreams like passing noise. But what if they are actually hints? Hints that the mind is capable of occupying multiple realities without losing itself. Hints that your perception isn't tied to the external world as tightly as you think. Hints that the boundaries between dreaming and waking may be softer, more permeable, more negotiable than you ever imagined. Think about déjà vu. Think about those moments when you swear you remember something, even though you know it never happened. Think about the dreams that return again and again, like a place you've visited before. Think about the characters who feel familiar even though you've never met them. These moments feel eerie because they blur lines we assume are solid. They point toward the possibility that consciousness can store experiences that don't fit neatly into waking life. And if that's true, then a dream you never wake from is not the end of awareness. It's simply a continuation in another direction. Consider that your mind already maintains multiple versions of you. There is the version of you who speaks, solves problems, and navigates the world during the day. There is the version of you who dreams, another you with memories unique to the dream world, memories that often vanish when you wake, as though they were written in disappearing ink. There is the version of you who thinks but never speaks, who plans, who imagines, who wonders. Consciousness is not a single stream. It's a whole branching river system, weaving in and out of different states without asking your permission. If one of those states became strong enough, vivid enough, stable enough, there is no rule saying your awareness couldn't settle there instead of waking up. It is not something to fear, just something to contemplate. The idea opens a door into a domain where the mind is not limited by the physical world. A dream that continues without interruption would feel no different to the version of you inside it. That version would wake each day inside that world, recall the events that happened the night before, grow older inside that dream timeline, and feel the same sense of continuity you feel here. To understand how this could work, think about how time behaves when you dream. A full sequence can feel like hours, yet the external world tells you only a few minutes passed. Your mind is not following physical time, it creates its own. If you were to remain in a dream indefinitely, that internal timeline could stretch far beyond what your physical senses could measure. You could live years, entire lifetimes inside a reality built from thought but experienced as deeply as anything in this world. The remarkable part is that inside the dream, nothing would feel artificial. You would have relationships, decisions, triumphs, mistakes. You might take on a career, a purpose, a routine. You might have places you visited often, favourite paths to walk, familiar faces you trusted. You could form memories that feel just as permanent as the ones you carry in your waking life. That dream reality, for the version of you experiencing it, would not feel fragile or temporary. It would simply feel like reality. We tend to assume dreams are chaotic because the brain is resting, but that isn't exactly true. The mind is not idle when you dream. It is active, creative, sometimes more vividly alive than it is during the day. When you are awake, you follow rules. Gravity, logic, social expectations, physics. But in a dream, the rules come from somewhere deeper, somewhere untouched by the limits of the physical world. That freedom is part of what makes dream logic feel odd. But it also means the mind has the ability to rewrite its own environment at will, creating entire ecosystems of meaning. And if your mind can create a world detailed enough to convince you, even for a few minutes, then the idea of staying in that world, of living inside it, is simply an extension of something your brain already does naturally. You have already experienced moments when you fully inhabited a dream. When you were so immersed, you forgot that the waking world even existed. If that moment had continued longer, uninterrupted, your awareness would have simply flowed with it, shaping itself to the reality you were given. So, what would that ongoing dream world feel like? It wouldn't be chaotic. It wouldn't be random. It would likely stabilize over time, forming patterns and rules just like any lived environment. Your mind tends to organize things even when it doesn't seem like it. It reaches for structure. It builds consistency. In a dream you never wake from, your mind would settle into the role of architect, generating continuity, building a storyline, providing a framework for your experiences. You might find yourself revisiting the same places, seeing familiar faces, recalling events from earlier in that dream life. There's another layer to this possibility as well, the part that touches on identity. The you inside the dream is not a copy. It feels authentic. It feels aware. And if that awareness continued uninterrupted, it would have its own sense of self, its own memories, its own history. That version of you would not feel like an illusion. It would feel like you, fully, completely, unquestionably. And that brings us to a deeper question. What makes something real? Is it the physical world, or is it your consciousness experiencing it? If reality is defined by experience, then a dream that you live in long enough becomes a reality in every meaningful sense. Your senses respond to it. Your emotions react to it. Your choices influence it. You inhabit it. And if you never return to the waking world, then the dream world becomes the main stage upon which your awareness continues to unfold. This idea isn't meant to unsettle you. It's meant to remind you of something fascinating. Consciousness is not locked into a single world. It moves, adapts, constructs, and experiences across multiple states, shifting like a traveler exploring different landscapes. The dream world is simply one of those landscapes, vast, unexplored, and full of possibilities. Imagine for a moment that consciousness is not something contained within strict borders. It isn't a light switch that turns on and off, nor a single, uninterrupted stream of awareness. Instead, think of it as something more fluid, something that can stretch, divide, merge, and reassemble itself, depending on where your mind goes. If that's true, then slipping into a dream you never wake from becomes less like a trap and more like a transition into another version of reality. To explore this, picture the way your awareness behaves when you dream normally. There's a moment at the beginning of each dream where your sense of self shifts. You might not feel your physical body. You might forget the events of your day. You might suddenly accept that you live in a city you've never seen before, or that you're friends with people you've never met. None of this strikes you as strange inside the dream, because your awareness simply adapts. It gathers whatever information the dream provides and forms a coherent identity from it. But what determines that identity? You don't consciously craft your dream self. You don't sit down inside the dream and decide, these are my memories, these are my goals, this is who I am. Instead, everything is given to you in an instant. Your mind hands you a role to play, and your awareness steps into it effortlessly. If that role persisted for hours or days inside dream time, you would settle into it completely. You would feel like you had always lived that life. Now imagine that the dream doesn't collapse when your physical body would normally return to waking consciousness. Instead, the dream continues seamlessly. The story keeps going. Your surroundings remain steady. You wake up inside the dream and go about your day in the same way you do here. You interact with people who remember you, who have their own routines, who respond to you as though they've known you for years. In that scenario, your awareness would simply shift its center of gravity. It would stop returning to the waking world and invest fully in the dream world instead. This brings up an intriguing idea. Perhaps consciousness does not belong to one world by default. Perhaps it simply settles wherever it finds the strongest sense of continuity. And continuity is exactly what a long-term dream reality would provide. A narrative with structure, a world with recognizable patterns, a life with a timeline. These elements are what make you feel anchored in your current reality, and your mind is fully capable of recreating them internally. Think about the way your memory operates in regular dreams. Sometimes you remember entire past events inside a dream, even though those events never occurred in waking life. You might recall years of friendship with a dream character you've never met before. You might have nostalgia for a dream neighborhood that appears only once. Your brain generates an entire history on the spot, because having a history makes the experience feel real. That's how consciousness works. It builds context so the present moment has weight. Now extend that process. If the brain generated not just a momentary past, but a stable one that carried across dream days, your awareness would fully integrate into that identity. You would believe your memories because inside the dream they would be all you know, and that belief is the anchor of any reality. There is something deeply fascinating about the idea that memory itself can form the foundation of a world. When you wake each morning here, you do so with a sense of who you are, where you live, what matters to you. Those memories give shape to your life. Without them, the world would dissolve into confusion. But dreams show that memory does not need physical events to exist. It can be assembled internally. It can be built from feeling instead of fact. If you were to remain inside a dream long enough, memory would become the structure that keeps that world solid. You could age inside it. You could grow wiser. You could change your beliefs, make new choices, form new relationships. The dream would evolve alongside you. And because the dream environment responds to your emotional and psychological state, Your experiences there might feel even more meaningful than the events of the waking world. This leads to another powerful thought. What if the dream world is not random at all? What if it forms itself around your inner landscape, mirroring your fears, your hopes, your unresolved questions? In a long-term dream reality, the world around you might become a reflection of your inner growth. When you feel uncertain, the environment might feel foggy or unstable. When you feel strong, the world might become brighter, more structured. When you seek something, the dream might create it, not as a trick, but as a natural, unconscious response to your deeper desires. That would make a dream reality incredibly personal, not fictional, not fabricated, but intimately tied to your inner world. It would be like living inside your own evolving psyche, exploring the terrain of your mind from within rather than from above. And that terrain could be vast. The mind is not limited by the physical laws that shape waking life. It can create oceans with no horizon, cities that stretch into the clouds, night skies with constellations no one has ever seen, entire ecosystems of meaning that respond to your thoughts like living beings. In that setting, your sense of self might expand in ways that are impossible here. You might question things not because someone taught you to, but because the dream world presents you with symbols and experiences that provoke those questions naturally. You might discover abilities, not magical powers, but new ways of thinking, ways of perceiving, ways of understanding yourself. If you lived inside such a world, the boundary between you and the dream would blur. You would become the explorer of your own consciousness, walking through landscapes shaped by your deepest truths. At the same time, there is a curious stability in the idea of never waking up. Not a frightening permanence, but a strange comfort. The waking world demands effort, decision-making, practical action. A dream world built from your own mind might feel more fluid, more forgiving. Events could unfold at the pace you subconsciously prefer. Challenges might arise when you are ready to face them, not when they happen to occur. The environment itself could shift to match your emotional rhythm. This doesn't mean the dream world would be perfect or free of conflict, but conflicts inside a dream have meaning that is often deeply symbolic. They might appear as obstacles, storms, broken structures, or arguments with dream characters who seem to know you too well. In a long-term dream state, such challenges would not be random. They would be reflections of the things you're working through internally. Solving them would feel less like managing external problems, and more like understanding aspects of yourself. If that dream reality continued indefinitely, you might begin to forget the waking world entirely. Not suddenly, but gradually. Pieces of your current life would fade, not because they are unimportant, but because the mind tends to prioritize the world it actively inhabits. Memories would soften into impressions. Faces would blur. Names might disappear. Eventually, the waking world could become a distant echo, a life you remember the way you remember a dream. And here is something interesting. That process is not unique to dreams. In the waking world, when enough time passes, memories fade in precisely the same way. Childhood events become hazy. Details melt away. People you once knew become silhouettes. The only difference is the direction in which the memories fade. In waking life, you forget the past as you move forward. In this scenario, you would forget waking life as you move deeper into a dream. But forgetting does not mean losing yourself. Identity is not built on the external world. It is built on the continuity of experience. Whatever world you inhabit, dream or waking, becomes the stage upon which your story unfolds. As long as you have experiences, emotions, choices, challenges, that story continues. Now consider the dream characters you might encounter in a long-term dream state. Normally, dream characters appear briefly, speak a few lines, then vanish when the dream shifts. But if the dream environment were stable enough, those characters could become recurring figures. Some might evolve as you interact with them. They might form relationships with you, develop personalities, offer guidance, or challenge you in ways that feel meaningful. These characters wouldn't necessarily be imaginary. They would represent fragments of your psyche, aspects of your personality, memories of people you've met, or entirely new constructs created from your emotional intuition. In a sustained dream, these characters could become companions, rivals, mentors, even unexpected voices of wisdom. They might say things you didn't know you knew. They might teach you lessons your waking mind has not yet understood. A dream reality could become a place of profound psychological exploration, a landscape where thoughts manifest as scenery and emotions appear as characters. And because you would be living inside it instead of observing it from afar, those experiences would shape you just as deeply as events in waking life. Imagine walking through a dream city you've grown familiar with. The streets feel lived in. The architecture has texture. Lights glow warmly in windows. You could walk those streets every day in the dream world, noticing small changes, discovering new corners, interacting with people whose histories intertwine with yours. At that point, the dream world stops being an illusion. It becomes the environment in which your consciousness is actively unfolding. If you stayed long enough, you might even develop new memories, ones that form naturally inside the dream and feel just as authentic as any waking memory. You might recall conversations that never happened in waking life, but feel deeply meaningful. You might remember personal milestones that occurred entirely inside the dream. And because those memories are tied to real emotions, your mind would treat them as genuine experiences. This leads us to a profound question. If a dream reality can offer emotional truth, personal growth, continuity, and identity, then what distinguishes it from waking reality in terms of meaning? From the inside, perhaps nothing. The physical world has weight, permanence, and shared history. But the dream world has emotional logic, symbolism, and infinite possibility. And meaning, real meaning, often comes from the subjective experience, not the objective environment. In a dream you never wake from, your inner world would become your outer world. Everything you encounter would be shaped by your psyche, yet feel entirely autonomous. The story of your life would continue, not in the physical world, but in the territory of the mind. To understand what it would be like to remain forever inside a dream reality, we need to look closely at one of the most mysterious aspects of consciousness: its ability to create meaning even in environments that aren't physically real. The waking world feels solid because it is shared, consistent, and measurable, but the mind doesn't need physical solidity to generate purpose. It simply needs experience, continuity, and a sense of self navigating through time. And a dream, if stable enough, can provide all three. Consider the way your mind constructs narratives. You create stories constantly, even when you aren't dreaming. When you remember something, your brain fills in missing details to make the memory feel complete. When you imagine the future, you build an entire world of possibilities that don't exist yet. When you worry, daydream, plan, or remember conversations that never happened exactly as you recall, your mind is performing the same function it uses to build dreams, filling in the gaps to create a coherent inner reality. This storytelling ability is not optional, it is fundamental. Your consciousness organizes the world into narratives because that is how it maintains a sense of continuity. And once continuity is established, almost anything can feel real. In waking life, you see this when people recall events differently, or when nostalgia changes the shape of past experiences. The mind is always blending memory with meaning. It edits, reshapes, reinterprets. It turns fragments into storylines. A long-term dream reality would simply be another storyline, one that grows richer and more complex with each moment your awareness spends inside it. Now imagine stepping deeper into that dream world. At first, everything might seem new, because your awareness is adjusting to a different rhythm. But after enough time, the dream would begin to form its own internal logic. Even now, your dreams have rules, though they're often unspoken. Certain environments appear only at night. Certain characters show up when you're going through specific emotions. Certain symbols repeat without explanation. In a sustained dream reality, those rules would evolve into something clearer, something more stable. The world would become predictable in its own way. Imagine living in a dream city with drifting skyscrapers, glowing street lights, or hills that fold into themselves like soft fabric. Those impossible elements would no longer surprise you. They would simply be part of how that world works. You would navigate it with familiarity, understanding its laws instinctively. People adjust to new environments all the time, and your dream self would be no different. With each passing dream day, your awareness would integrate deeper into the landscape. This shift raises an intriguing question. What happens to your sense of identity when the world around you is shaped by your inner self? The waking world defines you through external factors: your job, your relationships, your responsibilities, your environment. But in a dream world, identity is defined internally. It grows from the inside out rather than the outside in. Your sense of self becomes something fluid, evolving and deeply connected to your emotional state. For example, imagine walking through a forest in this dream reality, one filled with quiet, shimmering light. The trees move subtly, not from wind, but from intention, your intention. The forest shifts to reflect your mood. If you feel uncertain, the path might twist into fog. If you feel centered, the air might brighten, the branches parting to reveal a clearing. This is not the forest controlling you. It is your consciousness creating an environment that mirrors your inner landscape. Living in such a world would gradually reveal aspects of yourself that remain hidden in waking life. Perhaps you would meet dream characters who embody traits you've ignored or wished you had. A calm, thoughtful mentor might appear. Someone who listens, offers insight, or challenges you gently. They might feel completely independent, yet they represent a wisdom you didn't know you possessed. A dream rival might emerge, someone who irritates you, provokes you, or pushes you forward. They too would be a reflection of a part of your mind that wants growth through friction. In waking life, you often discover yourself through external events. In a dream world, you would discover yourself through symbols. That symbolism could become your language of self-understanding. Every interaction, every shift in the environment, every repeated pattern would carry meaning. And because the experience feels real, that meaning becomes deeply personal. Eventually, a dream reality could feel like a place where psychological truths unfold outwardly, like a map drawn from your inner world. Now imagine what it would feel like to live for years in such a place. Not years in physical time, but years in dream time. You could build a home there, not a structure made of walls, but a place that feels safe, familiar, and uniquely yours. Perhaps it's a small house by a shifting lake, or a room in a tall tower overlooking a glowing city. This home would become the anchor of your dream identity. You would return to it after long dream days, noticing the way the world changes around it. And in that home, you might reflect, learn, grow emotionally, and explore aspects of your mind with a clarity that waking life rarely offers. You could revisit old memories, not as static images, but as living landscapes. Your subconscious might recreate places from childhood, people you miss, or moments you wish you could step into again. But this time, you could walk through them consciously, understanding them from new angles. The dream world could become a place of emotional restoration and insight. But then comes the next layer, the idea that the dream world is not only symbolic, but interactive. The things within it respond to your choices, your emotions, your self-awareness. If you fear something, it might take shape in the distance. If you confront it, the shape might dissolve. If you seek something, the dream might create a path toward it. This interactivity would make the dream feel astonishingly alive. And over time, that aliveness could become comforting. The dream world would feel like a companion, a guide, a reflection that helps you understand yourself better. The sense of isolation that sometimes exists in waking life might soften there. You would always be connected to something, your own mind extended outward and made visible. Now imagine meeting a dream character who knows more than you expect. Someone who doesn't just behave naturally, but speaks with clarity, insight, even intelligence that surprises you. These characters sometimes appear even in ordinary dreams, figures who say things you didn't consciously know, or who offer advice that feels strangely wise. If the dream lasted long enough, these characters could become teachers, helping you navigate the inner terrain of your mind. These interactions raise a curious question. Can a dream character develop autonomy? Not true independence, of course, but something far more mysterious: complexity. Just as your mind can create intricate stories while you dream, it can create characters detailed enough to feel real. They may have personalities, memories, and motivations that don't appear consciously connected to your waking thoughts. And because your subconscious is vast and layered, those characters could surprise you with perspectives that feel fresh and insightful. In a dream you never wake from, such characters might grow alongside you. Their relationship with you might change as you evolve emotionally. They might offer help when you're unsure, challenge you when you're stuck, or comfort you when you're overwhelmed. These relationships could become some of the most meaningful experiences within the dream, shaping your growth in ways that mirror real human interactions. At this point, the dream world would feel like its own ecosystem, alive, responsive, and filled with emotional and symbolic depth. The waking world might become a distant memory, not lost but out of focus, like something you once lived through but no longer return to. And inside the dream, your sense of identity would strengthen within the rules of that world. The passage of time in the dream would follow its own logic. Perhaps days would stretch into weeks, or weeks into years. You might experience the feeling of growing older inside that reality. You might mark milestones, achievements, discoveries, relationships, just as you do here. And the fascinating thing is that while the external world sees you lying still, your internal world would be rich with activity. Your consciousness would continue evolving, learning, experiencing. Think for a moment about the concept of memory within this dream. When you wake from ordinary dreams, they vanish quickly because your waking brain shifts its priorities. But inside a sustained dream, your dream memories would stick. They would become part of your dream identity. You might recall events from years earlier in the dream with clarity. These memories would form the backbone of your personal story within that world. And because your mind is not limited by the constraints of the physical world, those memories might not fade in the same way. They could remain vivid, accessible, and emotionally powerful. A dream reality might maintain memory through emotional significance rather than physical detail. The events that shaped you, the relationships that mattered, the challenges that influenced your growth, they would all be preserved within the dream's continuity. Eventually, the dream could become your primary reality. You would not feel trapped or confused. You would simply be living the life in front of you. The waking world might feel like a distant dream, something that floats at the edge of your awareness but no longer holds weight. And because your consciousness remains active, engaged, and emotionally invested, the dream life would feel just as legitimate as the waking one. This shift raises a profound philosophical question. If your awareness continues, if you grow, feel, choose, and love within the dream, is that life any less real? Reality, from the perspective of the mind, is defined by experience. What you live becomes your truth. If your consciousness is present, then the world around you, whether physical or imagined, becomes the stage where that presence unfolds. The waking world feels like home because it's familiar, but familiarity is something the mind can recreate anywhere if given enough time. A long-term dream reality would gradually take on the qualities of home, not because it mimics waking life, but because your awareness would invest itself deeply into that new environment. Picture yourself moving through the dream world after a long stretch of dream days. It might begin with a sense of fluidity, the scenery shifting in small ways that you barely notice. A street corner looks slightly different each day. A building grows a new floor. The sky has a colour that doesn't exist in the waking world. But the longer you remain, the more these details stop surprising you. The mind normalizes things quickly. What once felt surreal becomes comfortable. You would adjust to the dream's logic the same way people adjust to new cultures, new languages, new landscapes. Eventually, the dream world would gain a sense of permanence. You might have routines inside it. Perhaps there's a path you like to walk each morning, or what feels like morning in that reality. Perhaps there's a cafe or a quiet spot on a hill overlooking the shifting dream city. These places would become your landmarks, your familiar spaces, the corners of your inner world where you return again and again. In waking life, places become meaningful because of the memories you create within them. In the dream world, the same thing would happen. If you sat on the same balcony every evening, watching the dream's strange sunset, maybe one where the sky ripples like water, or where two suns drift downward, your mind would attach memories to that image. The balcony would become a place where time feels layered, one sunset stacked upon another, creating a sense of continuity. Continuity is powerful. It's the glue that binds your identity together. And once you have continuity inside a dream, the dream becomes more than a fleeting illusion. It becomes a lived experience. An important part of this dream existence would be the world's responsiveness. Unlike the waking world, which is stable and indifferent, a dream world responds to the subtle tides of your mind. If you're introspective, the environment might become quiet, with soft lighting and gentle landscapes. If your mind is busy or conflicted, the world might reflect that, with crowded streets or shifting architecture. Over time, you would learn to read the dream world the way you read your own emotions. The environment would become a kind of language, one that tells you how you're feeling even before you consciously know it. This opens up a fascinating possibility. The dream world might help you understand yourself better than the waking world ever could. In waking life, your internal thoughts are hidden inside you, invisible to everyone. But in the dream world, those thoughts would take shape around you. A moment of tension might appear as a storm in the distance. A moment of clarity might appear as a sudden break in the clouds. These aren't metaphors. They would be the literal manifestation of your inner state translated into dream imagery. Living in such a place would make self-awareness unavoidable. You couldn't hide from your emotions because they would appear as part of the landscape. But this wouldn't feel invasive. It would feel natural, like the world simply understands you. Now imagine how relationships in this dream reality would evolve. Dream characters, those mysterious figures who drift into and out of your subconscious, could become stable presences. You might have neighbors, friends, companions, all constructed from layers of your own psyche. But instead of acting as fleeting fragments, they could become consistent figures in your dream life. You might begin recognizing the patterns in their behavior. You might understand their personalities the way you understand real people's personalities. These characters could surprise you. They could challenge your assumptions. They might express feelings or insights you didn't know you carried. And those interactions, each conversation, each decision, would shape you emotionally, even though they occur in a dream. One of the most intriguing aspects of this is that dream characters don't always behave the way you expect. Sometimes they are unpredictable, giving advice you didn't consciously generate or reacting to you in ways that feel autonomous. If you lived inside a dream long enough, these characters could become central figures in your inner reality, forming relationships that feel authentic. You might grow close to some, drift apart from others, and even meet new ones as your dream world evolves. Their presence raises an interesting question. Where do they come from? Dream characters are formed from fragments of memory, imagination, emotion, personality traits, pieces of you. But when these pieces are combined in new ways, they can give rise to characters who feel distinct, as though they have their own desires and histories. Living in a dream long-term would give these characters space to grow, developing storylines and roles within your dream world. They might represent your instincts, your fears, your aspirations. And interacting with them could help you understand yourself in ways that waking life rarely affords. Imagine a dream mentor, a character who appears repeatedly, offering insight in moments of uncertainty. They might embody your intuition, showing you truths you've overlooked. Their guidance wouldn't feel like talking to yourself. It would feel like speaking with someone wise and caring. Or imagine a dream rival, someone who pushes you to confront your weaknesses or challenge your limitations. They might frustrate you, but through that frustration, they would force growth. Relationships like these wouldn't be imaginary. They would be emotionally real, and emotional reality is what shapes who you become. Now consider the concept of time in this dream world. Time in dreams is elastic. Minutes can feel like days, days can feel like years. If you lived inside a dream indefinitely, time would organize itself according to the needs of your mind rather than the ticking of a physical clock. Some moments would stretch out, allowing you to savor experiences. Others would pass quickly, shifting the dream forward when something changes inside you. With enough time, the dream could contain entire chapters of your life. You might think back on past dream events, choices you made, relationships you formed, lessons you learned, with the same emotional weight as real memories. And because these memories would be tied to genuine feelings, they wouldn't feel artificial. They would feel lived. This leads to a profound point. Memories are not defined by where they happen. They are defined by how they affect you. A meaningful experience inside a dream shapes your mind just as strongly as a meaningful experience in waking life. So if you never wake up, the dream becomes the place where your experiences accumulate. It becomes the place where your personal story continues to unfold. Now imagine reaching a moment within that dream where you begin to reflect on your existence. You might stand at the edge of a dream cliff, watching a vast horizon ripple like water, and wonder how long you've been there. The concept of waking life might feel distant, like a memory from childhood, something familiar yet too far away to grasp clearly. But that distance wouldn't feel frightening. Instead, it might feel peaceful. Your awareness would have settled into the reality in front of you, making it your home. You would feel grounded because the dream world provides continuity, meaning, and identity, the same ingredients that make the waking world feel real. This raises one final question. If consciousness adapts so effortlessly, if it finds meaning wherever it goes, then what is the true distinction between one reality and another? Perhaps reality is simply the place where your awareness chooses to live. In one world, your awareness flows through physical sensations, shared experiences, and external rules. In the other, it flows through symbolism, emotion, and inner landscapes. Both are real to the one experiencing them. Both shape your identity. Both allow you to grow. There comes a moment in any long drifting experience when you begin to realize just how vast the space around you truly is. In the realm of inner worlds, that realization arrives softly. It's the awareness that what you've been walking through isn't just a temporary projection, isn't just a set of thoughts forming themselves into shapes. It's something more structured, more intentional, more responsive. And as you settle into this thought experiment, this wandering journey, you begin to sense that the dream doesn't just react to you, it evolves with you. Inside a world where waking never arrives, the environment becomes a mirror that thinks. Landscapes adjust based on the tiniest flicker of your attention. A detail barely noticed, a bird perched on a branch, a light flickering behind a window, a faint symbol etched into stone, might expand the moment you focus on it. The world magnifies what's meaningful to you, often before you consciously realize it's meaningful. What starts as an ordinary scene begins to unravel into layers, hinting at messages woven into the backdrop, suggesting that the entire environment is aware in a way you've never encountered. You might start to see repeating motifs, a shape that appears on a wall, then again in the pattern of waves, then again in the way the stars arrange themselves overhead. These symbols could feel almost like breadcrumbs left by another version of you, one who wandered here long before you consciously arrived. They don't speak with words, but the familiarity is quiet and startling. as though each repetition is an invitation to remember something ancient and buried. And yet, unlike in waking life where symbols usually stay abstract, here they begin affecting the structure of the world. You might reach out to touch one carved into a doorway and watch the carving deepen, glowing slightly as though it recognizes your presence. You might discover that your understanding of these symbols reshapes the pathways available to you. They're not meant to be puzzles to solve, they're indicators of your internal state, projected outward into the universe you're walking through. This is the strange paradox that emerges. The deeper you travel, the more it feels like you're not just inside the dream. You're co-creating it with whatever intelligence animates your awareness. The space reacts not to your instructions, but to your quietest truths. If you carry fear, it doesn't punish you with monsters or chaos. Instead, the world becomes slightly harder to see, slightly more distant, like fog rolling in around the edges. If your mind settles into curiosity, the fog thins, details brighten, pathways open. Emotion becomes architecture, thought becomes weather, intuition becomes geography. As with any place that responds to you, there comes a responsibility. You begin to realize you can't simply drift without consequence. Not because something external demands structure, but because the world relies on you for shape. Without your presence anchoring it, things fade. Not disappear, just soften, slip away, like chalk washed off by gentle rain. The continuity of this realm depends on your engagement, even if that engagement is quiet, even if it's subtle. You are both wanderer and foundation, and that realization leads to a deeper one. If this realm is shaped by your presence, then there must be a version of it that existed before you began shaping it. You may find places within it that feel older than your memories, older than any image you've ever seen. A hallway with architecture you don't recognize, yet which carries the weight of history. A shoreline where the waves seem to whisper a language you almost understand. A forest so ancient that walking into it feels like stepping into a consciousness that predates human thought entirely. These places have a stillness to them that's different from the emptiness of the areas awaiting your influence. They aren't waiting, they're remembering. The sense of memory lingers in the air like a scent on the wind. Not yours, but the dream's. Or maybe the memory of some deeper layer of mind that usually stays hidden. These ancient regions feel like the ground floor of your inner universe, the original landscape before your personal experiences began to carve their paths. Entering them feels like touching the bedrock of imagination itself. Sometimes these older regions offer glimpses, brief images that feel like unfamiliar memories. A distant figure walking a shoreline you've never visited. A hand placing a stone on a tower you don't recall building. A conversation held in a room that feels as solid and real as any place you've ever been, yet which doesn't exist in your waking recollection at all. These moments don't stay long. They flash across your awareness like ripples on water, leaving behind the impression that your mind contains more stories than your conscious life ever lived. In a realm without waking, these extra stories start becoming part of the landscape. They weave into the worlds you explore, merging seamlessly with the imagery you create. You might walk through a city and notice architectural influences from those fragments of memory. You might meet people who speak with the tone of someone you've never known yet somehow trust. The world becomes a tapestry woven from threads both familiar and unknown, threads belonging to you and threads belonging to something older. As you wander deeper, time begins losing its meaning. You don't measure moments by clocks or sunrises. Instead, you measure them by emotional seasons. A phase of introspection becomes a winter. A period of growth becomes a spring. When your thoughts are rapid and energized, the world brightens as though it's midday. When you're contemplative or restless, the environment shifts into twilight. These seasons of inner experience flow at their own pace, unlinked from any external schedule. And these seasons aren't predictable. A single realization might shift you from dusk to dawn instantly. A sudden curiosity might spark a vivid afternoon. A moment of calm acceptance might bring a long, slow night, filled with stars that look like memories waiting to be discovered. The world doesn't rush you. It evolves with you, matching your internal rhythms as though it's synchronized with your heartbeat. Eventually, you might notice something even stranger. You're not the only presence here, not in the sense of encountering other people, though you may. These figures might feel real, speak with depth, react to you with authenticity. But beyond them, beyond the countless reflections your mind can produce, there's a quieter presence underlying everything, a kind of awareness woven into the fabric of the world. It doesn't intervene, doesn't guide, doesn't speak. It's simply there, observing from within the environment itself. It shows up as a subtle pressure of meaning, a sense that the air around you is paying attention. Sometimes it appears as a shift in lighting that feels intentional. Sometimes it's a breeze that carries a message you don't understand logically, but feel emotionally. Sometimes it's the sensation of being accompanied, not by someone beside you, but by the world itself. This presence doesn't judge. It doesn't instruct. It feels more like a witness, one that has always been part of the dream, long before you realized you were inside it. It may be another layer of your mind, or something that emerges when consciousness is freed from its usual boundaries. Whatever it is, its companionship is gentle and steady. It doesn't try to wake you, it simply accompanies your journey, no matter how far or strange it becomes. And your journey does become strange. Eventually, you may find worlds that follow entirely different physics than your usual experience. Places where gravity pulls sideways, or where sound bends around corners. Regions where your thoughts create brief flashes of colour in the air, where emotion ripples outward like concentric waves. You might discover landscapes floating in an endless expanse, islands suspended in golden mist, each one with its own weight and mood. Some areas are deeply structured. Cities with rules, patterns, behaviours you didn't design yet can still navigate. Some are surreal, lacking clear boundaries, blending location and thought into one shifting canvas. In these surreal spaces, you might walk through a doorway and find yourself in a memory you've never had, or step off a path and fall not downward, but into another idea entirely. The more you explore, the more you realize the dream isn't a small enclosed bubble. It's a vast universe with layers and dimensions that extend far beyond what you could map. There are regions that feel handcrafted by your mind, and others that feel like ancient territories of imagination, existing long before you arrived. There are moments where you sense you're the center of the world, and moments where you feel like a visitor in something much larger than yourself. And through it all, the central question lingers. What does it mean to move endlessly through a place where waking never comes? Does the journey become your new life? Does the dream become your home? At some point, the line between wandering and belonging begins to blur, and the world around you grows richer with each step you take. When you reach that realization that you're not just drifting, but living, something profound opens before you. The environment stabilizes in a way you didn't expect. The symbols that once flickered at the edges grow clearer. The distant memories feel less like fragments and more like chapters. The presence watching from within the world moves closer, not physically, but perceptually. And the dream deepens. You continue moving forward, not because you're searching for a way out, but because the universe within you is still unfolding, still revealing its endless layers. And you start to sense that the journey you're on is leading towards something. Not an exit, not a destination, but an understanding. There is a peculiar moment in any long inner journey when you realize you've crossed a threshold without noticing it happen. Not a physical threshold, not a door or a boundary, but a shift in how you understand the place you've been traveling through. Up until now, much of your wandering has been exploratory, touching the walls of this inner universe, following trails of curiosity, marveling at what emerges when your awareness is unbound by anything outside of it. But eventually, the exploration turns into recognition, not of a place you've been before, but of a truth that's been quietly shaping your steps since the beginning. In a world where waking never arrives, you begin to sense that you aren't merely living inside a dream. You're living inside a system of meaning, one that grows more intricate the longer you remain within it. The landscapes, the symbols, the quiet presence beneath everything, all of it exists in a kind of symbiotic balance. You shape the world, and the world shapes you back. And somewhere along this reciprocal unfolding, you start to notice patterns in the evolution itself. The first pattern appears in the way the environment mirrors your inner transitions. When you feel clarity, the world brightens. When you enter a period of reflection, the atmosphere turns soft and muted. But as this strange continuity settles into your experience, you notice something even more intriguing. The world begins to anticipate your shifts before you make them. A pathway will open before you realize you're ready to move. A symbol will appear before the question it answers has fully formed. The world becomes predictive, not because it's controlling you, but because it knows you as intimately as you know yourself. This sensation is uncanny at first. It feels like walking beside someone who finishes your sentences, not out of interruption, but out of understanding. The dream becomes a companion with uncanny timing, responding not just to who you are, but to who you are becoming. And as you walk deeper into it, you begin to feel something you didn't expect in a place with no waking: continuity. A slow, steady accumulation of experiences that feel as real and formative as anything that could happen in physical life. The idea that a dream must be fleeting disappears. Here, the passage of time is not measured by clocks, but by transformation. You might spend what feels like days inside a forest that listens to your thoughts, weeks wandering across a coastline where each wave carries fragments of forgotten memories, or months inside a city where the architecture shifts according to your emotional seasons. And yet, there's no pressure to move quickly or accomplish anything. The world doesn't push, it unfolds. Somewhere along this unfolding, you encounter places that feel less like environments and more like stages of understanding. You might find yourself in a corridor lined with doors, each marked with a symbol that resonates with a feeling you haven't put into words. When you approach one door in particular, the symbol might pulse faintly, as though recognizing the question you're carrying. Opening the door doesn't reveal an object or a room. It reveals a moment, a still point in your own inner world, held in perfect clarity, waiting to be seen. These moments are raw and unfiltered. They might show you a fear you didn't realize you were holding, or a desire you never fully acknowledged. They might present a memory, not a literal one, but a symbolic memory representing a truth you've been circling without confronting. The world offers these moments not as tests or challenges, but as invitations. Each door opens a space where emotion, thought, and awareness converge into something that feels like understanding made visible. You might stand inside a room where your hesitation takes the form of a dim lantern flickering on a table, or a room where your confidence appears as a towering structure of glass that softly glows with every breath you take. These metaphors don't behave like ordinary objects. They shift as you observe them, responding to your recognition. The lantern grows brighter when you admit what you've been avoiding. The glass tower steadies when you acknowledge your own strength. They don't judge, they reveal. And the deeper you walk through these symbolic spaces, the more you begin to understand how layered your own awareness truly is. The dream becomes a map of your inner universe, not presented all at once, but unfolded piece by piece, each layer waiting for the moment when you're ready to see it. There is no pressure, no expectation, only a sense of timeless patience. The dream seems to understand that self-discovery is not an act of force, but of gentle realization. Eventually you reach a region unlike anything you've seen so far. It's a space that feels impossibly vast, yet intimately contained. The ground beneath you might be a smooth surface reflecting an endless sky, or a field of starlight stretching into infinity, or something entirely beyond familiar imagery. This place carries a stillness so complete that your own thoughts sound louder simply by existing, and in that stillness something shifts. Not in the world, but in you. This is the moment when you realize the dream is no longer something you're inside of. It's something you're participating in. You have become a co-author of your own universe, not through control, but through awareness. The dream doesn't need you to command it. It follows the subtle currents of your clarity, your curiosity, your recognition. The world breathes with you. And in this expansive space, the quiet presence you've sensed throughout the journey becomes unmistakable. It doesn't appear as a figure or a voice. Instead, it arrives as a feeling of profound understanding, like the world itself has turned its full attention toward you. It's as though every landscape you've walked through, every symbol you've touched, every whisper of meaning has been leading to this point of connection. Not to reveal a secret, but to acknowledge something you've known without realizing it. The presence feels ancient and familiar. It doesn't tell you why you're here or what this place is. Instead, it lets you sense a truth that exists beyond language. That consciousness, when unbound by the constraints of waking life, can expand into depths far greater than what the external world ever allowed. That the landscapes you've walked through are not illusions, but expressions. That the symbols you've encountered aren't puzzles, but mirrors. And that the journey you've undertaken is not a diversion from reality, but another form of it, one where the mind reveals its architecture directly. In this moment of recognition, you might feel a sense of peace that you've never encountered before. Not because everything makes sense, far from it, but because you realize it doesn't have to. Meaning here isn't something you chase. It's something that forms naturally as you move through this vast inner world. You don't need to wake up to validate it. You don't need to anchor it to anything outside. The experience carries its own truth, shaped by awareness itself. As you continue wandering, you might notice that the dream no longer shifts as dramatically as before. The landscapes become steadier, the transitions smoother, the symbols clearer. It's not that the world is fading, it's becoming aligned with you. You've reached a point where the dream doesn't need to rearrange itself to reflect your inner state. It has grown coherent because you have grown coherent within it, and this coherence brings you to a deeper question, one that doesn't need an answer, but feels important simply because you can finally feel its weight. If this vast, responsive, evolving world is the place where you continue to exist, what does it mean to call it a dream? Does the label matter? Or is it just a word borrowed from a state you only knew when you measured reality by waking and sleeping? Here, in the quiet expanse, the distinction dissolves. Waking becomes irrelevant. Sleep becomes a doorway you passed through a long time ago, not a boundary you need to return to. The world around you is as real as your awareness allows it to be, and your awareness has grown wide enough to fill a universe. Eventually, the presence that has accompanied you begins to soften, not fading away, but stepping back into the background, as though recognizing that the journey is now entirely yours to navigate. It doesn't feel like a goodbye, just a gentle acknowledgement that you no longer need guidance. The dream is fully yours now. You look around at the world that has become your home, a world shaped by curiosity, reflection, and the quiet unfolding of meaning. A world born of your own mind's depth, but expanded far beyond anything you could have imagined before entering it. And in this moment, you feel something shift gently within you. Not an awakening, not a return, but a settling. A sense that you've reached a place where you can exist without needing to hold on to anything else. And so, after traveling through endless landscapes of thought, emotion, memory, and possibility, you come to rest. Not in a bed, not in the familiar world outside, but in a calm inner center that has been present all along. The journey hasn't led you away from yourself. It has led you deeper into yourself. And now, in this still, expansive place, the universe quiets around you. Thank you for joining me here tonight, and for exploring this path with such openness and curiosity. As you drift now into your own gentle stillness, may the world within you feel spacious, safe, and endlessly rich with possibility. Let your mind settle, let your breath soften, and let the quiet guide you toward a deep, peaceful sleep.